It's never too late to reinvent yourself. Even if you're starting to think about, well, what do I want to do when I retire? You need to start thinking about that now. What fun things am I going to do then and not wait?
Welcome to the Midlife Reinvention Podcast. I'm your host, Kavita, and the founder of Power Purpose Play, a global community of women in midlife. I'm here to tell you that it's your time now to rediscover what has always been inside of you and bring that out into the world. If you're wondering what's next, but don't know quite what that is, or if you feel a twinge in your heart telling you that you have so much more to do and so much more to offer, you're in the right place. Ask yourself, if not now, when? Do you want to leave your job, start your own business, take control of your health, reignite the passion in your marriage, write that book, or at least that first chapter? Transitions like this can be daunting, but through listening to my story and interviews with incredible women every week, I hope to inspire you to take action. I rediscovered myself after the age of 50, and I know you can too. It's my time now to help you do just that. I'm so excited you're here. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Midlife Reinvention Podcast. If you're in the United States, today is Memorial Day, so I hope you take some time to reflect and enjoy a lovely long weekend. We enjoyed a great long weekend here in Canada last weekend for Victoria Day as well. For those of you globally, I would love to hear from you. How are you enjoying this podcast? I was speaking to a good friend of mine, and I mentioned to her that with podcasts, it's often difficult to know how your messages are resonating. So I'd really love it if you posted a review or even just send me a quick message. Email me at kavita@powerpurposeplay.ca and tell me, do you enjoy this podcast? What do you want to hear more of? Would you rather more mini solo episodes, or do you like the interview format? Any feedback is valuable to me in order to improve my offerings to you. I've really been contemplating the gift of life this past weekend, and unfortunately, one of my good friend's mother passed away last week, suddenly with no warnings, and I attended her funeral on Friday. One moment she was having a beautiful dinner with her family, and the next morning she was gone. We all have witnessed the extreme tragedies occurring with the multiple mass shootings in the U.S. lately. Innocent children murdered for no reason. And sometimes I wonder, why is this all happening? I don't mean to start this podcast off on this note, but really, why is this all happening? I'm not going to get into a gun control debate here, but really fundamentally, why do these horrible things keep on happening? Do these things happen to remind us of how precious our lives really are? That is the only one good thing I can imagine coming out of events like this. But do we need tragedies to remind us of that? When I saw the grief on my friend's face, the extreme sorrow, it reminded me how little we know of what can happen next in our life. We have this one life. What are we going to do with it? Take care of it, my friend. Do with it what brings you joy and love one another, because you never know what will happen tomorrow. Before I get into this week's episode, I want to give you a few reminders. I feel grateful that I have the ability and opportunity to lead women like you through figuring out what is really next for you and what do you want to do with this precious life of yours. If you are in a transition of some sort, a career, relationship, health, or just wondering what's next, I can help you. My coaching program is open to a few more people, so if you're interested in learning more, book a complimentary coaching consultation with me. Email me at kavita@powerpurposeplay.ca and I can share more. I'm also pleased to announce that I will be sharing some insights from my coaching program in a series of 6 webinars called the Midlife Rediscovery Blueprint. Join me in the second webinar this Friday, June 3rd at noon Eastern Standard Time, where I will be talking about how to rediscover your reason for being, or Ikigai. The link to the webinar is in the show notes, or you can email me directly again, and I can send you the login details for you. We will provide worksheets and exercises for you to follow along with as well. In addition, as I mentioned in previous podcasts, In our quest to empower 1 million women in midlife worldwide, we are offering our online course, It's My Time Now, completely free of charge for a limited time. Email me again and tell me why you think it's your time now, and you will receive access to this comprehensive course with 7 modules and 26 lessons. It is a curated journey I created from my own experience of reinvention and years of training, research, and interviewing countless women. If you're interested, contact me today. Speaking of life transitions, this week I had the pleasure of speaking with Debra Voorheis, who knows a thing or two about career transitions, especially in midlife. Enjoy the episode, and I'll be back with the key takeaways at the end. Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of the Midlife Reinvention podcast. I hope this day finds you well and you are stepping into your inner power and purpose. If you're new to this podcast, I'm your host, Kavita Ahuja, and the founder of Power Purpose Play. We are a global community of women in midlife who are saying with confidence, it's my time now. To that end, I interview incredible women who will serve as inspiration for you and who will give you examples of how to face the obstacles in your way and take that first step towards reinvention. Then my next guest is both a successful leader in her field, but also someone who is generous and always looking to help others, whether that be through connecting you with someone else or in her volunteerism. I'm so pleased to have on the podcast today, Deb Voorheis. Deb is a senior executive with leadership experience across a broad range of industries. Deb joined the Bigwin Group with a passion for empowering people and identifying and working with diverse teams. As a partner, Deb plays a key role in the Bigwin Group's innovative and creative work to help organizations grow and develop. A successful builder of high-impact teams, Deb's background includes professional services, luxury goods retail management, and not-for-profit fundraising. In addition, she has consulted in the area of business development in the arts sector. Deb is a talented, results-driven strategist who will work to build revenues through strong relationships. And Deb has always believed in giving back and has helped raise over $1 million for Porridge for Parkinson's, which funds scientists working to find the cause and cure for Parkinson's disease. Currently, she is the national chair of Women and Philanthropy initiative with a Parkinson Canada to fund research into how PD affects women differently than it does men. I would love to get into that. So thank you so much for being on the program today, Deb. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you. It's great to see you, Kavita, and glad to be here.
It's wonderful to have you here, Deb. And there's so many things I'd like to talk to you about. I'm fascinated. We talked earlier about women's journeys and how they got to be where they are today. And you're currently a partner at Bigwin Talent Strategy Group, and you've had senior executive roles in your life. Can you share with our audience, how did you get to really where you are today? What is a bit of a timeline of your story? And
well, I think like everybody, no one's career is a straight line, and all of our experiences add up to what makes us successful, and finding that almost your default position of what do you love, what are you passionate about. I started my career at the Bay. I was in management training, and I was a young department manager. Then I joined Bowring's, the Bowring Little Stores, gift stores, and then went to Harry Rosen Menswear, where I was the first female salesperson in Harry Rosen Men many years ago. And that I really credit that role with teaching me how to sell and how to be pretty fearless about approaching people. We launched a clientele development program, which was a follow-up call system where every salesperson had to phone their customer, find out how the goods were, how the purchase went, and they didn't get their commission. And so I was 25 years old, telling these very seasoned salesmen at Harry Rosen that they were not getting their commission until they made that phone call. I wasn't really very popular.
Was this a program you put into place?
No, it was a corporate program, and I was the willing victim delivering it in my store. Anyways, I had to do the calls as well. And I phoned my customer who had bought a couple of ties, somebody who worked on Bay Street. I really should find the name of who it was. I keep crediting this person. And I phoned and said, how are those ties working out? And he said, oh, they're great. Fine. Thank you. Click, hang up. And I thought, oh my God, I can't do this. I'm a failure. I can't sell. A couple days later, he came into the front door of the store and he said, where's that girl that sold me those ties? And I thought, oh, so now we have a relationship.
Yes.
And that was really an aha moment. It doesn't mean that doing the calls or making the reach outs aren't still nerve-wracking or a little bit intimidating. They are, but the more you know about people and the more you know about who you're approaching. So what happened is after Harry Rosen, I was a stay-at-home mom for close to 20 years. And while I was at home, I did lots of fundraising as a volunteer and also had a couple of small retail businesses. We did pop-up stores before pop-up stores were a thing in home decor. We called them the traveling store. And so I had always been working with people. I had always been selling something. That's really a common theme in my career, and building relationships. I went through a life transition in 2008 where my husband and I separated, and all of a sudden, what am I going to do now? I joke that I didn't play golf, don't play golf, and don't play tennis, and wasn't looking for a next husband. So I had an opportunity to go back to school. I did my executive MBA at Schulich, and I had thought about doing that while I was at home, but it had never worked out time-wise. And also at that point, I didn't have a role. I didn't have a job or a title. And in 2008, or also in 2010, rather, I'm separated, and my dad, we had a consulting engineering business in Calgary, which my dad had run for 40 years under a governance structure that I wouldn't recommend, as the sole major shareholder and CEO. So no, you don't want to do that. Anyways, I was his executive power of attorney, and he was ill for almost a year. And I went in and acted as interim CEO of the company. I'm not an engineer, but I grew up around the dinner table talking about job sites and soil foundations and core samples and all of those things. So, and I know how to manage people and run an office, run a business. So I went in. It was completely nerve-wracking, I would say. And I commuted from Toronto to Calgary for just about a year. I'd go every 2 or 3 weeks. I'd go to Calgary for a week, and we kept the wheels on the bus. The business survived. We didn't have to lay off any employees. We collected lots of old bills and did some business development, put in some new process. And so I used that, I leveraged that to go back to school. So now I had a title. I was interim CEO. I also had a wealth of information I could use for case studies. So I did that. My dad went back to work. He recovered and was doing fine. I mean, he was only 80 at the time. So, I mean, he really he's a driven guy. He was
only 80. Huh?
Only 80. Yeah, exactly. And loved doing the MBA. I have 2 daughters, and my oldest one was at university at that time, but my youngest one was still in high school. So I'd be downstairs at the dining room table studying, and she'd be upstairs in her room. And it was a fantastic experience. It really opened my eyes to what's possible, the change that you can do, the people that you meet. And again, it wasn't that it was easy or it wasn't terrifying. I mean, after the first week, I thought, what the heck have I done here? Right? It was really jumping off a cliff. I was with a group of young professionals who were 40, 45-year-old, the average age. And I was not the oldest in the class, but I was certainly on that end of the spectrum. To this day, they're some of my best friends, and many of them have been generous in opening the door to business opportunities for me. And in fact, two of them really helped me to get where I am. And I say this with love for these two guys, because they said, well, we figured out what you should do after you graduate. And I said, oh my goodness, thank God I don't have to think about it anymore. And they said, you have a great network. You know lots of people in Toronto. Why don't you do a business concierge service for senior executives moving to Toronto from international companies, not just where they live or what school their kids go to, but what charities they get involved in, what ski clubs they belong to. How is it going to best benefit the business by the network and community they create in Toronto? I thought it was a great idea. I really, at the time, was uncomfortable with monetizing it. And I shared this story with my book club, and which is a group of very type A women. And I thought for a long time, I don't belong here, but I think I do. And lots of lawyers, investment bankers, people who own their own companies, very accomplished, great group of accomplished women.
Yes.
And they said, if you were a man, that's business development. They said, you should be doing BD. And that was, again, a light bulb moment. So it took me a little while to get to the BD place. I went to, after I graduated, I worked at Sporting Life for about a year, but realized that post MBA, it wasn't what I want. I didn't want to go back into retail management. And then I started to raise some money and develop a client list for a startup, and following that, arts groups. So really, again, asking people for money.
Yeah.
Some people can do it and some people can't.
Yeah.
And on any volunteer committee I've ever been on, the group will say, okay, Deb will do it. Let Deb will ask them. Anyways, in the course of raising money or looking for money for one of my clients, which was Opera Canada magazine, which if you like opera at all, I'll put in the little pitch here. If you like opera at all, or if you don't know anything about it and you want to learn, they're a great publication. And I was introduced to them through someone in my book club whose husband was the chair of the board, and said, we have a project. We're trying to raise some money for a digital transformation. And can you help us? And I said, sure. I knew nothing about opera, but I've learned. But I knew about reaching out to people and building relationships. And in the course of that, I had coffee with a woman I had worked for 24 years ago, who has a PR firm, and one of her clients is a bubbly water company. And I thought, that's perfect. They would love to sponsor the opera. And so we're getting caught up. And as women do, it's never just a straight conversation about work. We talk about our families. Yes. We talk about our travel. We talk about fashion. We talk about work. And it's so multi-layered that it's fun, right? It's really fun. So in the middle of our conversation, Bonnie said to me, could you do business development for a search firm? And I'm a great believer of say yes, and then go figure out how to do it. And call your network and get them to coach you. And I said, sure. And so the next thing I knew, she was setting up a meeting with her husband, Hart Hillman, who is the founder of Bigwin Group and our CEO. And I did all my homework about where are the gaps in search and what would you need to do for BD and what value could I bring? And he surprised me, brought us another one of our partners with him to the coffee. And the dynamic changed. All of a sudden, they're pitching me on how I should join them and do search. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is interesting. And I thought to myself, I have nothing to lose here, right? Yeah. Ties in my skills with loving to meet people, building relationships and selling, and getting paid to go have coffee with people. What's better than that?
Fantastic.
And so that I thought to myself, okay, I'll give it 6 months. And that was 5 years ago.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
What a great story. Thank you for sharing that, Deb. What I really love about it and what I really want people listening to really get from this is that it doesn't have to be a straight line, right? Life is not a straight line. And what I love about, you mentioned several times, your relationships. and that the selling initially, and when you were in retail, then that great story about the tie, the man with the tie, and that you recognize that you're networking and your relationships. So you kind of followed the breadcrumbs of your life, and one thing led to another. But the other thing is that you're open to possibility. You said you never say no, or you always
Right.
say yes to opportunities. And I think that is such an important lesson, because oftentimes we put ourselves in boxes. We think, oh, this is what I was meant to do. I went to school for this, so I have to do this. Whereas especially as we go older, I think it's like, look at what our strengths are. Look at the breadcrumbs along the way. What have I always loved to do? And in your case, it's relationships and networking. And here you are. And as you said, 6 years later. So
Right.
I don't know if you realize that, but as you're telling me, you said that many times. And that's what I just encourage women, especially, is to look at the breadcrumbs in your life, and it can lead you somewhere you'd never expect it.
No, and we all have those.
Mm-hmm.
And an example is last week I was speaking to somebody who's a senior fundraising executive in the US looking to move back to Canada. She's an expatriate, and thinking that she's can only do a certain number of things. And I said, no, look at what you've done. Here's let's pull it out
and
start to talk about what are the transferable skills, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think people do get into boxes where they think they can only do one thing. I mean, think of the number of, and they use this term, recovering lawyers who've left law to do other things. You have those skills in you. You just have to learn to tell the story.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what we're doing here, just telling stories, right? And I love you also. It seems like you're very passionate about empowering people. And when you told me about your going back to school and doing your executive MBA, and how some of the women there are now like your best friends. And what do you think is so unique about women, especially on the midlife stage? And why do you think that women in this stage have still so much to offer? Hi, my friend. Kavita here. Do you often feel blocked from moving forward? We all feel that way at times. These are referred to as energy blocks. I've created a short, actionable PDF guide to help you release your negative energy blocks. Click the link in the description to download it now for free. Now, let's get back to the episode.
I think because we've got lived experience.
Yeah.
We've done budgeting, we've done people management, we've done event planning, we've done organization, you've done crisis management, whether it's at work or home, and you've used humor probably most of the time, or tears, to get through things.
I like that.
We've all been there. I think and it's dismissive of society to think that women who are in mid-stage of their career can't continue to contribute. I mean, we don't look at men that way, and women just need to step up. Women need to talk about themselves more, and to be willing to try, to not be so afraid. I think it's the same thing that happens where a man will see a job description, and if he only has 30% of the skills, he'll say, oh, I can do that job. I could learn on the job. Where a woman, most often, if they don't have 110% of the skills, they won't apply. I mean, so I use myself as an example of that. When I joined Harry Rosen Men, I had never sold menswear. I had been in retail when I had never been in search. Even with volunteer fundraising, I had never raised money for playground reorganization that the TDSB went through several years ago, where during the summer they tore down the playgrounds because they were unsafe in many schools, and then the schools set up committees to rebuild them. And I didn't know anything about that, but you learn. I mean, we're resilient, and we are generous, I think, and women respond very positively to having communities and networks. And that's why, I mean, I am very passionate about helping young women and all women develop. But that to see that their possibility is there. And I wish I had done it sooner than I did. But the thing is, we make choices for ourselves at stages in our life that we think are the best choices. And then don't limit yourself, don't close the door on something.
Yes. So great. I love that because it's so true. I love when you said we use humor and tears. I like that because it's true. And we have such a lived experience, and we have so much potential and so much to offer. And and hopefully society is recognizing that more and more, especially for women in the workforce who are at 40s, 50s, 60s. Like we still have, and that's in what your work is doing. I think that you're really promoting that. So that's wonderful.
Well, one of the things I love about Bigwin Group is that we really do, our mandate is to put forward a diverse slate, and not just gender diversity, but ethnicity and looking at accessibility as well. And we're not happy unless we are presenting unique candidates. The thing about search for me is that it is about relationships, and it's about finding or surfacing great candidates. And it is a bit like matchmaking. You feel like, oh, that's the person, right? You think. And had conversations with clients where they've said, I don't know about this one. I said, no, they're the one. And that's who they end up hiring. Or the reverse is, how do you respectfully handle a candidate who's not moving forward, and that they're not going to be the successful one, but we've put ourselves into their lives. We came knocking on their door. So it really behooves us to be respectful and to treat them like the sensitive person they are.
Yeah,
right?
I was going to ask you about your emphasis on diversity, hiring, and inclusion. And I know it's a topic that many companies are putting forth. And sometimes I wonder, is it real? And tell me about that. Like, what does it really mean to you? I know you mentioned it a little bit, but does it actually occur?
It's occurring more than it used to. I don't think that it is lip service. We've been working in this area before it was as fashionable or as timely as it is now.
Yeah.
I just finished an online diversity, equity, inclusion course at Stanford for the firm to give us more perspective on it and more knowledge about it. Because if I'm the diverse partner at Bigwin, we're in trouble because I'm pretty white bread, middle class. So we need more diversity in our senior leadership team ourselves. And that's not a secret. But what we do is we're looking for diversity of thought as well. And if you have someone of color and somebody who's white, who've gone to the same schools, the same university, both end up in finance, they likely think the same too. So how do you find those people who are outside of that, who have maybe had a different educational experience, maybe have not grown up in Toronto? And so we're really looking for those unique candidates all the time. Sometimes our slates are received very well. Other times the client's appetite is not quite there yet. But part of our job is education as well, and talking to them about why the individual would be valuable and relevant for their company.
Yeah.
So there's work to do, and doing the course itself really showed our own firm some things that we're not doing well. And one of the things is, what are your own non-conscious biases, which I think is a great term rather than unconscious, because you can do something about it. It's not, or there's an expectation then that you should do something about it. You can't just say, oh, it's unconscious, so I can't change that. That's who I am. Well, no, I don't buy that.
Yeah.
It's non-conscious. You're not thinking about it, and you could be thinking about it.
I like that.
So, the course was fabulous.
Yeah. I really think that's important, what you said about diversity of thought, because I don't think putting people in place in roles just because of their gender or their ethnicity. I don't think it's really is about how diverse is their thought, how can they contribute as a whole to, and diversity of experience too, right?
Yes,
and
exactly. So the
background,
I mean, I think of a lot of boardrooms where Everybody looks alike. Everybody, until recently, and I know that there's change, everybody looks alike. They went to the same schools. They travel in the same circles. And it's not just, you can't just stop at bringing in people who are diverse. How do you support them? How do
Yes.
you make them feel welcomed when they're there? And it is so systemic. I mean, it's shameful how systemic it is. So that's another conversation.
Yeah, we can talk about that for a while.
Right? We really have at Bigwin Group concentrated on that diversity of thought. And I applaud
good.
our founder for that, because from the beginning, he did that.
Yeah. Because you're in this area, I wanted to ask you, because of the last 2 years, or with the great resignation, I guess, that's happened, and people are looking more inwards to discover, what is it that I really want to do, and what are you seeing as some of the trends for women right now, especially in terms of transition career? They may have been in a corporate career, for example, for a long time, and now it's like, they work from home, and now they're realizing that maybe I don't have to do that, or maybe there's something else out there for me. And what are some of the things that you're seeing in the workplace, fields that are emerging, or some of the trends you're seeing for women, especially?
I think so. For women, it's a really good question. Where we're seeing the great resignation is not so much at the senior level. We work at VP level and up, but a lower level, people who are managers or in admin positions, and they don't want to do the 2-hour commute every day. And they've had time to spend time with their family, whether they're male or female. We're seeing that too.
Yeah.
And spend time with their family, or perhaps it's childcare or aging parents. So that is something that we're hearing about, and we're certainly seeing the competition for any technology roles, from architects to software engineers. Any technology roles are very competitive. For us at the senior level, what we're seeing is that there's opportunities in other geographic locations that people wouldn't necessarily have had. So you can live in Toronto and work for a company based out of the US or in Western Canada, or even Europe, if you're willing to do the time zone difference. And actually, a lot of north-south similarities in technology, with a big tech hub in Austin, Texas. And that's definitely on the same time zone as Toronto, so there's no issue there. So what we're seeing is people taking advantage of opportunities where they can go to a new career, go to a new company, use what they've done already, and keep building on the experience they've had. I think for women, we're seeing a lot more of women starting their own companies, that they see a need and will either develop a product or a service. And that speaks to the flexibility that gives women. I see women moving to more companies owned and managed by women as during this great transition or resignation, because there's a feeling of being understood. It's not going to be the same old corporate environment at all.
That's really interesting. I didn't realize that the technology roles, and I have seen more and more women-led owned businesses coming up. It seems it's interesting in the last year, at least I've seen. It's like, wow, maybe it's just because I did that and now I see more of it, but I see it seems more prevalent, and which is really great. And it's always an interesting thing to determine what is it that I want to do next. And one of the reasons that I think holds people and women, in especially back, is their lack of courage to move forward, or to do the thing that they know they can, but then they're always been in this, and as I said earlier, the box, right, that they put themselves in. So I kind of want to flip that and maybe ask you something about your life and the challenges that maybe you had in your life, and we all have them, and how did you overcome them, or what would you say for women who maybe has gone through main challenges and is trying to figure out, what do I do next, and just afraid of taking this next step? Because you told me earlier that you didn't hesitate to say yes to things. So how did you find that courage? And I know that's a lot of questions there, but just more around courage and your obstacles that you had faced or challenges.
Well, thank you. I don't know how I found the courage. I think that I was at stages where the opportunity presented seemed so much better than where I was sitting at the moment. And as I said, when I looked at search, I thought, okay, if I give it 6 months and I don't bring in searches, then I go back to developing my client roster and continue to do fundraising and BD for the arts. And within the first 6 or 8 months, I had brought in 4 pieces of business. So I thought, okay, I can do this. And I stayed. I think it helps to have people to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, I wasn't working with a coach necessarily, but I do encourage people to use coaches. And I think that it's an amazing resource to have a coach to work with. Somebody who is objective and you can talk to them about things. They're going to be more objective and more encouraging. Than your family will be, or employers or work colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I should reframe that. I did have 2 or 3 sessions with a woman who was a recruiter and who I knew through the charitable work I had done. And we did a mind map. She was really the person that said to me, it's the relationships for you. That's how you build revenue through relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And so talking to her, having somebody who had a perspective about work, because I was surrounded by lots of great people, but people who weren't, not as many who were actively in the workforce at that time. And then having to make the decisions for myself after having been in a long-term marriage.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of the things I remember thinking about is about buying a new house and thinking, oh, who am I going to talk to about this? Because in the past, it would have been my husband and I making that decision, right? And now that wasn't a possibility. So I think you need to find like your own personal board of directors, people who you trust and who will tell you, they're going to give you the unvarnished truth. And I certainly got that again through the MBA, in fact, some of the volunteer work I do came as a result of the MBA because our cohort had 15 women in it out of a class of 45. So, which is a great number to have. We had 3 women in my team. So now we're just part of the group. We're not the token women, right? And we developed our own, what we called, just the worst name in the world, called it WEMBA, Women of the Executive MBA. But it was at our own personal board of directors. And we had tried to have annual retreats previous to COVID, where we would get together at someone's home or often at my cottage. And we would talk about business, careers, what's the next step, horrible bosses, family, kids' education. A couple of the women weren't married at the time, but were dating and what was the next step there. And then children, right? So the whole gamut once again. And they have been invaluable about giving me support on decisions I've made. I mean, even one of them, I said, I don't know what to do about my house insurance. What should I do about that? Do I raise? She had experience with it, and because I had never had to do that before.
It's again, a networking, right?
And the networking.
I hear you. It's about the tribe, I think, that you're the tribe that you surround, and love that personal board of directors. So that helps you get through some of the life's challenges, I believe.
Right.
Yeah.
And from that, other women in the Kellogg-Schulich program said, we want what you guys have. We want that. So we developed the Kellogg-Schulich Women, which is a speaker series that I'm active with. And we try to do 3 events a year. Zoom has been fantastic for us because we've been able to increase the network. Yeah. So I think you have to don't be afraid to say yes and talk to people. And you have more, I really believe this, people have more inside of them and more skills than they realize. They start writing it down, start a list of what are the things you do well, what do you love to do. I mean, it's all in there with us.
Yes, one of the exercises I do with my clients is it's about the strengths, yes, but it's also about passions, right? Like, so I say, remember what you did when you were a child. What brought
Mm-hmm.
you joy? What would take hours to go? And can you bring that back into what you're doing now?
Right.
Often we don't remember
Oh,
how we used to play, right?
yeah.
And what is it about that play that we can bring into our lives right now? And it doesn't mean I don't mean by going like for a 2 week vacation and coming back to the grind that we come back to, but it's
No,
about bringing that every day into your life and yeah,
finding that.
finding the
Exactly.
passion. Yeah, that's great. That's
Exactly.
great. Wonderful tips. Thank you. Deb, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your fundraising and that you've always believed in giving back, and you have raised over $1 million for something called Porridge for Parkinson's. And as I mentioned, it says raising fund for scientists working to find the cause. So tell us a little bit about why you're passionate about this. And there was something about the differences between men and women with Parkinson's.
Hmm.
Maybe you can get into that a little bit.
Okay. So my youngest brother was diagnosed with early onset Parkinson's disease about 15 years ago. And I was introduced to this committee in Toronto called Porridge for Parkinson's,
Mm-hmm.
an event that originated in Vancouver by a woman named Marg Meikle, who was a CBC radio host and knew everybody in Vancouver. So when she was diagnosed with Parkinson's, she said, "Great, I'll have a breakfast at my house. Porridge is great for November. It's good alliteration and it's inexpensive." Well, she raised $50,000 out of her house that Sunday because she had lots of matching skills and because she was a celebrity. She then asked three of her high school friends who live in Toronto if they would pick up the mantle and do it here. And in 2004, they did the first breakfast out of their homes too, and then realized that because they didn't have those same media connections, they needed to do something in a different format. So I joined the committee 11 years ago, and it's become a cocktail party at breakfast. So every
Okay.
2 years, yeah, every 2 years we have an event. We have a breakfast, a brunch with celebrity chefs, silent auction.
Nice.
Last time we had a Caesar bar, and we hosted over 350 people in 2019. And our goal is to raise money to fund research, to find the cause of and a cure for Parkinson's disease. From that, through a relationship that the committee previously had with Parkinson Canada, I've been asked to chair a national initiative for women for Parkinson to really help raise awareness of Parkinson's disease. It's it's a fast growing progressive condition, and over
Mm-hmm.
100,000 people are diagnosed each year. About
Really?
40% are women.
Really? Okay.
We know from other scientific research into medications that often the drugs are not as effective in women as they are in men, and that female mice are not used, that all of the drugs are tested on male mice. And so one of the questions that has come up is how are women's symptoms for Parkinson's different than men? And that addresses some diagnostics as well as care and medicinal treatment. And then also to fund female researchers, because there's a lot of women who are working in movement disorder clinics across Canada who are female and they're doing research into Parkinson's, and how do we encourage more women to do that, and how do we give them seed money for the studies they're doing, so then they can apply for larger and larger grants. And so we're just in the planning process of that. Our goal for 2022 is to host a number of cocktail parties / events across the country in October. So we're doing currently Toronto, Vancouver, and possibly Ottawa, Montreal, and Winnipeg are on the list. And to find women in the community who have an interest in Parkinson's, who have the passion and the resources for it, or who may introduce us to people that do have that, and have an evening where we have a female person with Parkinson's speak about their experience and their journey. Yeah. And then a scientist who's working in the research. There'll be more to come about that. And the long-term goal is to raise $250,000, which will then be matched through a program that Parkinson Canada has with a donor.
Wow.
So
it's great. And congratulations for all that amazing work. Especially, I know that being previously in the pharmaceutical industry, I know that it's surprising to me that so much of the research in many different diseases is not done on females, on women. And I know I was speaking with Deborah Gillis from CAMH about this, and she's also funding an initiative on encouraging more female researchers and more research into the aspect of women in disease. So amazing initiative. And what we can do is, if you'd like, you can put the links into your events or how people can help and donate. We can put that into our show notes so people can look that up as well.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
Would love to do that. Thank you.
Yes. Well, this has been wonderful. I just wanted to maybe if you wanted to say a few last words to any woman, especially contemplating maybe a career shift or looking to think about what's next in their lives and are hesitating. What would you tell them from your vast experience and your leadership and just people that you're networking? What would you tell women who are hesitating to move forward?
I think the first thing I would say is don't be afraid. Second thing is talk to people that you trust. Tell them what you're thinking about. Start to have, they will, my dog is here, give you 100% positive feedback on it.
Yeah.
And I think you'll be surprised that there'll be more encouragement than discouragement. You know yourself, your inner strengths. And again, to go back to what you said, what you like to do, what gives you joy. And if you're not getting joy with what you're doing, you may not have to be as radical as quitting your job and going back to school, but find something within the same company. There's a million other jobs and make yourself think like a man for a minute and think, okay, I don't know everything about that. But I mean, when you started to do more domestic things, right? Cooking and baking, you didn't know how to do it either, but you learned. And so it's just the same thing. You can learn to do a new job. You can learn to do a new department. And I was thinking about Working Girls, the movie with Sigourney Weaver and Melanie Griffiths yesterday, and how Melanie Griffiths was the one who had done the research on the client, the media company, and then when was asked the question in that meeting, she was the one who had all the answers, and that was the start of her career. I mean, reading and research also too. I think that's been something. I'm pretty voracious reader and always seeing like what are companies doing that's interesting, what's new. Execution on my part maybe a little bit spotted, but taking those ideas in to have an idea bank of things that you do.
Yeah.
And really, and to thank you for being so interested in this, because I think it's never too late to reinvent yourself. And even if you're starting to think about, well, what do I want to do when I retire? You need to start thinking about that now. What fun things am I going to do then, and not wait, right?
Right. So, I mean, start now. And I love that. Don't be afraid to talk to people.
Yeah, don't be afraid.
Yes, I love it. I love it. Such great advice. And I really enjoyed our conversation, and I hope you did as well. So many pearls. And if anyone wants to, I mean, we'll have your information in the show notes, but just really, I love your passion for what you do, and it shines. So thank you very much for being a guest. And
oh, my pleasure. I feel honored.
Then maybe when you have the fundraiser for the PD, we can announce that as well. We can have you on.
Thank you. I'd love it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Deb. I really appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Take care. I trust you enjoyed my conversation with Debra, and it got you thinking about your strengths, your passions, and how you can weave those into what you're doing moving forward. Here are her key takeaways. Number 1, all of our experiences add up to make us successful. What do you love? What are you passionate about? Look at the breadcrumbs in your life because they may lead you somewhere you never expected. Number 2, what are your transferable skills? You have those skills in you. You just have to learn how to tell the story. Number 3, women in midlife have lived experience. We've done budgeting, people management, event planning, organization, crisis management, and we've used humor or tears to get through these. It's dismissive of society to think that women who are mid-stage of life can't contribute. Number 4, women need to talk about themselves more and be willing to try. Don't be so afraid. Don't limit yourself or close the door on possibilities. Number 5, diversity also means diversity of thought. What are your own non-conscious biases? You can do something about it. Non-conscious means you're not thinking about it, and you could be thinking about it. 6, after transitions like divorce, you really need to find almost like your own personal board of directors, people who will give you unvarnished truth. To get over challenges, it's important to surround yourself with a tribe and ask for help of a coach, for example, someone who is objective and encouraging, more than others may be. 7, it's never too late to reinvent yourself, and even if you're thinking, what do I do when I retire? You need to start thinking about that now and not wait. Thank you so much for listening. Remember, we have this one precious life. What are you going to do with it? If you need help figuring out that, reach out to me as I can provide you with my unique guidance from my own experience and extensive training. Seek me out as a coach, attend my webinars, take my course. It's all here for you to enrich yourself with. You just have to take the first step. Remember, if not now, when? Till next week, my friend, stay safe and stay well.